Hey, what's going on, Love Tribe?
Welcome to I Do Podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
You are the Love Tribe. We've unofficially, or is it official?
Well, it's kind of official.
It's official. I don't think we've ever talked about it, have we?
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
Oh, a while ago.
Designated I Do Podcast listeners as the Love Tribe.
Yes.
Group of individuals trying to find love.
Or improve love.
More love.
More love. Yeah.
Create more love in their lives. And we had a great interview on today's show that will definitely help you do that. We talked to Diane Barth all about how to navigate a interfaith, or it doesn't even have to be interfaith, but certainly there'll be bigger problems there, but a relationship around the holidays. And particularly interfaith couples have a bit more hurdles, but maybe not necessarily, because we actually talked about how, like, if you are interfaith and let's say Jewish and Christian, for example, there's not going to be a huge debate on which side of the family you're at for Hanukkah or Christmas, right? It's just like, we'll go here or there. But there are certainly a lot of problems, and it doesn't even have to be the holidays, but just family dynamics can be tough with parents and relatives. And then if you have a child, who gets to see the lovely granddaughter that we have is always something, not an issue, but definitely in a negative way, but definitely something that we have to be aware of and communicate about.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to manage our time a little bit better with the holidays now with Stella, just because everybody is quote unquote fighting for her. You know, everybody wants to spend the holidays with her. And so it's even harder than it was before when it was just us two, because now there's a whole other dynamic added in it. So it's very important to really talk with your spouse first, set those boundaries and those expectations with your partner first around the holidays and family. And then, like Diane said, go from there and then have that conversation with your families.
Yeah. And it's not easy to communicate with your spouse all the time, and then certainly not easy to tell your parents who may have raised you a certain way, and you're like, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to go to church, temple, whatever it is. I'm sure, or maybe you do, and it's not an issue. But from personal experience, Sarah and I have both had to have those conversations, and Diane gives some very specific communication tools that can allow you to communicate it in a way that you are showing respect and acknowledging your parents' feelings, or it could be your partner's feelings as well. But then also, like Sarah mentioned, putting those boundaries out there. So with 49% of couples today are in interfaith relationships, as Diane notes. So
unmarried couples living together.
And then 39% for married. So it's still a significant portion. So there's a lot of things that we just got to learn to communicate about. And Diane gives us some very specific tools on how to have those conversations and move forward.
And probably one of my most important tips that Diane gave was toward the end of the interview, where she talks about it being a evolving process, you know, that it will shift. Like, not everything will always stay the same in terms of the conversation as it is in the very beginning. And I think I can speak for Chase and myself that it's not easy in the beginning having these hard conversations, and it can put some stress on relationships with your parents, but it gets better. I mean, I think it can get better. At least for Chase and I, it has over 10 years. Really, it's been about 10 years since we've started this dialogue with our parents, that it's gotten better. And I think a big part of it comes to us really acknowledging that it is important to our parents, but that really sticking to our guns and saying that this is the person that we are now, and this is how we are going to do things. You still appreciate and love what they've done for you growing up in our situation, but that it's changing. And I think that really played a big role into at least our parents and how they've become a little bit more accepting of our choices.
Absolutely. And having those conversations with the parents, and then even between you and your spouse or you and your partner, it's important, even Sarah and I being together for 10 years now, that we continue to communicate in a way of respect and really just keeping those communication lines open, and me not assuming, I want to go see my mom over the holidays, and instead making sure that Sarah's needs are met. And at the same time, Diane has a great quote. I'll let her give it in the show, but she talks about compromise and how not every side, the definition of compromise is, that not every side is getting 100% of what they want.
Right.
And how that's such a valuable thing to remember in a relationship, that we do have to sometimes meet halfway or not even halfway. Maybe you are ceding a lot of what you want, and you're only getting, if you're going to put a number on it, 20% of what you want, but then just keeping that dialogue open with your partner, and it's valuable for everything, but especially the topics that are a little bit more close to us, a little bit more emotion tied to them, as far as family, the holidays. If you are a religious person, obviously that might be a big part of your life, and how to communicate that with your spouse are all really valuable things. And Diane gives lots of very specific, great tips. And it is the holiday season. That's why we are putting this out now. There's a lot of added stress, certainly. So don't let this be another thing that puts stress on your relationship. Listen to today's show to get lots of great tips.
Yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed today's show and have a wonderful day. Today's show is sponsored by Talkspace, the online therapy company that lets you choose from over 1,500 licensed therapists. Get matched with your perfect therapist today by visiting Talkspace.com/I do. That's Talkspace.com/I do. Hi, Diane. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you.
Diane, we've given our listeners a little overview, told them about your work. So why don't you take a minute, tell us about yourself and why you enjoy helping people improve their relationships.
Okay. Well, I've been a psychotherapist for more than 30 years, and I'm passionate about helping people actualize their best selves. And I've learned that our best and our worst qualities are often brought out in our relationships. So when we feel good about ourselves in a relationship, we're more effective at work and better able to get things done at home, and just more of the person we want to be. And when we feel criticized by our partner, and interestingly, even when we are critical of them and sure that everything that's wrong in the relationship is their fault, we also end up feeling less confident and less capable in everything else that we do. So I think that we bring ourselves, our best selves, into the early stages of a relationship. And then as we get comfortable and start to feel safe with each other, we start to allow some of the less positive aspects of who we are begin to emerge, which is actually really important. It's really crucial for every relationship, because we need our partners to know us and love us with all of our strengths and our weaknesses and our flaws. But the loss of that mutual glow of positive reinforcement surprises and confuses and hurts a lot of couples who think they're supposed to stay sort of blindly in love forever. And I really love helping couples begin to understand how relationships evolve and that they evolve over the years, and how to grow through those life stages together. And so sometimes the work is connected to specific events and specific difficulties, like the one we're talking about today, like the question of coping with religious differences during the holidays. And I just think it's really important to help couples start to deal with the conflicts that come up sometimes as soon as their first holiday season together, as they try to figure out how to be in 17 different places with parents and step-parents and grandparents with different traditions, and then trying to figure out their own traditions and how they're going to have a relationship together that integrates both of their childhood experiences and their. Sometimes we want to create the magical experiences we had when we were young, or we want to create something that we never had. But integrating all of the conflicts and differences between each other and in each other's lives. It's an honor for me to be present as a couple starts to find ways to resolve these conflicts and work together as partners instead of as two separate individuals blaming and criticizing and being hurt and angry at each other.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. And it is funny how relationships, like you said, bring out the best and also the worst in us. And we obviously want to go towards that best side, but it is only human to let our emotions get the better of ourselves sometimes, and the worst can come out. And especially, as you already mentioned, with the holiday season coming up, there's a fair amount of added stress likely in most people's lives, whether that involves getting together with your family or just the travel. I know Sarah and I traveling with just your spouse or your partner is okay. There might still be some logistics, but if you have kids, like we have 1 2-year-old, it can become a whole another production. And definitely we've let it get the better of ourselves that I know I get stressed and things don't go well. I might take that out on Sarah. And it's just not good. So managing all that is super important anytime, but certainly around the holidays. We got Thanksgiving coming up, and then the New Year's, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa season right there behind it. So, why don't we dive right in and talk about some specifics? Maybe we can start with what is the biggest obstacle a couple might likely face when trying to deal with the holidays as a couple and to keep that relationship strong?
Well, I think there's not. I don't think there's a single biggest obstacle. I think there are a few big obstacles, and one, of course, is family. And if you're an interfaith couple and you've got parents on both sides who want you to practice the tradition that you've always practiced or that they practice and that they believe is really the right tradition, it creates conflict. It's really interesting. One of the statistics that I read is that 49% of young unmarried couples living together these days are interfaith couples, which is a huge jump from what it used to be. And even among married couples, it's something like 39% are married to people outside of their own faith. And we think especially younger people who are so much more accepting and respectful of differences than a lot of us older guys, we think that we're going to be able to overcome this obstacle of our parents' differences and our parents' belief systems. But it gets really complicated. And it especially gets complicated if you both care about your families and you want them to love you and love your partner. So it's one of the hardest things, I think, is trying to figure out how to, as you said, travel is hard, and especially once you have kids, travel is hard. But how to manage your own expectations and your family's expectations is a huge obstacle.
So what's the best way to start that conversation? Maybe it's the conversation with your in-laws or your parents to kind of set those expectations and those boundaries when it comes to spending time or splitting up your time in the holidays.
Right. I think the first thing is to have the conversation with each other and to really do it as adults and understanding that your parents and in-laws are all human beings. They're not ogres out to try to make you miserable. But between the two of you to figure out what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, and how you understand what the people in your family are sort of asking you for. So, there are a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, some couples do Thanksgiving with one family and Christmas with another family and Hanukkah with another family, and or some couples do every other year with each family. Some couples try to integrate their families, have both families come together, which is difficult even when when your parents are still with their their original spouse, but it gets more complicated when there are step siblings involved. But I think the first place is to start with each other, talk about what you're willing to do, where you can be flexible and where you're not willing to be flexible, and then to talk with your parents as adult to adult, with some understanding of this is what that this is what they would like. It's not going to work that way. So what would be the best way to make it, manageable and pleasurable for everybody?
Yeah, I would think having your parents or your in-laws involved in the conversation will make it a little bit easier because they feel like they are being a part of the discussion and not just left out to whatever decision that someone makes as a family. Exactly.
That's really important.
Yeah, it seems like the primary theme with a lot of things that we talk about on the show is communication. And where things break down is you might assume like, hey, you might say, hey, we're going over my family's house for Thanksgiving. Let's make our plans. And the other partner's like, well, wait, like, what about my family? Or they might not even stand up for themselves and they just feel hurt or whatever. But so like really just opening up that conversation, I would imagine at any stage in the relationship, but especially early on when you're doing that first Thanksgiving, when you're a serious couple, you've been together for a while, and just keeping those lines of communication open. I don't know that, we're kind of talking about two things here. I don't know that, like you mentioned, that conversation needs to be between the couple first. It could get pretty messy if you're like, getting your mom on both sides involved and like, what do you think? And like having, you could communicate with them, but probably separately is going to be the best solution.
Oh, totally. I agree with you 100% on all of the points you made. I think, first of all, it's much more complicated than most young couples realize to have that conversation just with each other. Because exactly what you said, Chase, I think that couples, everybody's got an assumption that it's going to be the way we think it should be. So one person says, my mother's expecting us at 3:00, and the other person says, oh, well, mine's expecting us at 5, for each one for a big Thanksgiving dinner, or whatever the holiday is, for which almost all of our holidays center around food. So, it's important to have that conversation with each other and with the understanding that both of you don't want to hurt your parents' feelings. Both of you want to have a tradition that works for you as a couple, but you also want to integrate your parents and step-parents and whoever else into this tradition. How can you do it? And then you open it up to your parents. And I agree with you. You don't say, well, what do you think about, should I go over to my wife's or my girlfriend's family? Or, what you say is, this is what we're thinking about. But we really want it to work for you all as well as for the other family. How could we do it in a way that would work for you? And then with the understanding that you're not necessarily going to do what they're asking. You're asking them what would work best for them. If you get two really rigid sets of parents who say, well, you have to come to us, that's all there is to it, then you go back to each other as a couple, and then you figure out how you're going to deal with that. And as you said, Sarah, a big piece of this is setting boundaries. But you start with the assumption that everybody's going to be on board to try to work something out.
Yeah, I'm laughing because in years past, Sarah and I think we were thinking the same thing as she looked at me. But Thanksgiving, we've been known to have 2 to 3 Thanksgiving dinners
in one day.
in one day.
Yes.
And I can tell you,
it is not uncommon. I don't.
Yeah.
It's really sad, and I think part of that. So you tell me, did you all talk with your parents about doing that, or did you just decide that was how you were going to have to solve it?
No, I think we talked about it with what was it, like 3 different sets of families one year, and we just worked out a time that kind of worked for everyone. And I think it was because we were the common denominator amongst the 3 different groups. So, and since we travel a lot, we happened to be in town, and everyone wanted to kind of work around our schedule, which was really nice. But yeah, we had that talk with each other and with everyone else, and just kind of did a 3-hour gap in between each meal was, I think, how it worked. So we were pretty full by the end of the night.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you understood the need, and you talked, with each other and figured out that this would work for you, and that it would work for it sounds like everybody was willing to be a little flexible, at least in terms of scheduling. But that's a lot.
Yeah. The key is to open that up and keep the communication going. And now that we have a 2-year-old, it's another, I don't want to say compounding problem, but it makes it almost even more important because all the family wants to see our daughter, grandbaby or whatever, and she definitely wants the attention, not wants the attention, but the relatives want her attention. Yeah. So, and it's a balance, and I think it's important to put the relationship first, like between you and your spouse, and that takes priority. And then you're balancing the relationship between your parents and relatives. You don't want them to feel excluded. And like I said, we have, obviously Sarah and I have our different families, but then my family, I have divorced parents. So then there's like 2 extra families in there. So you're talking 3 families that around the holidays, right. There's a lot of coordination that goes on. And even if it's 2 families, it's still critical for everyone's sanity and to keep your relationship strong. Yeah.
But I have also found that if you go into this with a sense of this is what will work for us, that you're really working together, and then you also, it sounds like you all are really, really empathic to your different parents' needs, and that makes a huge difference. Parents are not always. I mean, there are times where you just have to set a limit, and that's and deal with the fallout. But a lot of times parents are much more willing to be flexible when you do let them know that you're trying to respond to what they're requesting. And when you engage them in the process of trying to figure out what would be manageable for them.
So when, Chase is bringing up the conversation of Stella and dealing with grandchildren and children, I know having these conversations is also important when you have a blended family, and sharing time with your, the kids going to your ex-spouse, or, just managing those conversations. So it is a little bit different because you're not having that direct conversation with your partner. But how do you navigate those tough conversations? Because that's, I feel like, taking it to a whole different type of conversation, because you're now trying to communicate with somebody who maybe is your ex and now your new partner as well. So how do you manage those conversations, and who would you talk to first? And do you have any advice in that type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That is a super common problem, and it's very complicated. And of course, it becomes more complicated when the divorce or the separation is not a kind one, and where you're really angry at each other and really not able to negotiate. But again, if you're in a new relationship, I think you start with the new relationship, and you both sort of try to figure out what works for you. You also have to try to figure out what works for your kids. And if they're old enough, you help you figure out what will work for them. And because, sometimes these family issues can really ruin the holidays for your kids. And then you try to negotiate with the kids' parents. It's really hard, but I think what you said, Chase, is key to all of this, which is to keep the lines of communication open with everybody and to try to figure out what works for you, figure out what feels most caring for your kid, which usually means not bad-mouthing the ex-spouse if you can possibly help it. And try to find ways to make it into a celebration, even if it's not exactly the one that you would like it to be. So, sometimes the interfaith issue actually makes things easier because I know a lot of couples who are interfaith couples who've gotten divorced, and so the one who celebrates a particular holiday, the kids go to that parent for the holiday. It gets complicated because a lot of people in the United States, for example, celebrate Christmas even though it's not their religious holiday. And so sometimes you then still have to figure out, the kids want to be with both parents, but both parents want the kids for Christmas morning, let's say, or for lighting the candles for Hanukkah, whatever the holiday is. You have to find ways to both talk to each other and talk to your current spouse or partner, and also keep the kids' needs at the forefront.
Yeah, and I think another key word besides communication is flexibility, because if you can be flexible and not super rigid, and especially when you're doing blended families but even if you're not, even if you're just dealing with your own and your spouse's family, if you can say and we've done this, I'm speaking from experience, all right, let's do, because I was raised in a Jewish household and Sarah in Catholic, and that's how they were raised just traditionally. So it did work out, but we did also celebrate Christmas, to get presents, whatever. We were double dipping, lots of presents all around. But
Right.
my point is that if we were going to do, let's say, Christmas presents with Sarah's family, we might do that on the 24th and then go over to my mom or my grandparents on Christmas Day, or vice versa, or whatever it is. And just, if obviously
Right.
you can't control your relatives necessarily, but if maybe you can produce that solution and say, hey, why don't we do this? And just being flexible. And the same can go really for any holiday. We got, Thanksgiving, we've done multiple meals in one day, which I like to avoid, but maybe even the day before celebrating then. So, yeah.
And I also found it helpful for our families when we alternated. I feel like Christmas was probably one of the bigger holidays for our families. And so we usually tried to alternate where we were each year. So one Christmas we were with Chase's mom, and then the next Christmas we were with my mom. And I think everyone, I felt like, seemed it was fair that way, just alternating it that way versus individual times throughout the day, because that can get really hectic.
Well, and they lived in different cities.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really important. What you're talking about is really, really important, which is that it has to be what works for you and your kids too. But one of the things that happens is the parent who doesn't get you that particular year may actually feel really sad because they aren't celebrating the holiday, especially if it's a meaningful holiday, the way they're used to, the way they like it. When in my family years ago, my mother's favorite holiday was Thanksgiving, and we would go to her regularly for Thanksgiving, but the Thanksgiving got to be too much for her. And so my brothers and I just made a unilateral decision that our families were all going to get together another time of the year, and that was going to be our Thanksgiving. We just weren't going to come back together at Thanksgiving. And the first year she was really not happy about it. And then as we did this other celebration, often in June, and was wonderful. She got to a point where that was fine for her. Thanksgiving, she did a little, celebration with some neighbors and some local family, and it was not a big deal. But I think what was really important was that we all recognized that the decision we had made did make her sad, and that we were sorry that it made her sad. It just wasn't working for the rest of us anymore.
Well, I think it's awesome that you did that, because it really shows that you're acknowledging that holiday means a lot to her, and that you're willing to do it at another time to still celebrate the meaning of that holiday for her. I think that's a really cool, a cool way to divide it.
Yeah, it worked out very nicely. So, yes, exactly. So what I'm saying is that the more empathy you can bring into the process without having to give up your needs all the time, the better the process seems to go.
So what can a couple do that is trying to communicate about the holidays? And it doesn't even have to be for the first time, because Sarah and I have been together nearly 10 years now, and it's still something we have to work on communicating. And I know sometimes when it breaks down is if I project a sense that I'm not acknowledging her feelings maybe, or like her right to spend time with her family, because I'm like, well, what about my family? Like, I want to see them. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, I love Sarah's family, but they're my secondary family, and like, I want to see my mom first. So how can we talk about that in a way that's respectful and just really, I guess, the details of communicating specifically around that kind of planning?
So I think you actually nailed several of the specifics. One is respect, that you talk about this in the time where you're both calm and where you're feeling loving towards each other, and you're able to be respectful of each other's needs and differences. And another is to know that as a couple, nobody gets all of their needs met all the time. Amos Oz, who wrote a lot about sort of the Israel-Palestine conflict, used to say there's no such thing as compromise if compromise means that you come to a solution that works for everybody. What you have to come to is a solution that has some of the ingredients that work for one person and some of the ingredients that work for the other person, because there's no real blending of your needs in a way that makes everybody happy all the time. So I think respect, I think spelling out what your expectations are and what your needs are and what your wishes are, which are all different, and then trying to find ways that are going to give each of you some of the most important things that you are asking for. The other thing is that, children do change the picture, which you all probably are very well aware of already. But so then you also have to think about what your children need, and you also have to separate out what you want for your children from what they actually need. So a lot of us get caught up in the fantasy that we're going to give our children memories, meaning usually we're going to have our children have the same experiences that we had that we loved. Well, they're going to get memories no matter what, and their experiences are not going to be the same as yours. And so again, a really kind and thoughtful conversation where you try to put together even the differences in what you think your children need is the best path to being able to find a solution. And you have to know that the solution is not going to be perfect.
So how would you go about having the conversation with one of your parents about, I guess, setting boundaries of whether or not you're going to be celebrating the holidays the way that they would want, like, for example, religiously. So if a family is Catholic or Jewish, and maybe you're choosing not to raise your child in that religion, but maybe your parents are pushy on it around the holidays, how do you confront your parents and basically say, hey, this is what we're doing, you have to respect it, how do you go about saying that conversation respectfully?
Well, I think it's a conversation that has to start way before the holidays, and it's an ongoing conversation. And the thing to remember is that your parents, as the mother of an adult son, I struggle with this all the time. Your parents had a lot of say in your life for many, many years, and it's hard for us to remember that we don't get that say anymore. It's like, oh, right, it's not my choice anymore. So if you can start with having the conversation at various and sundry times, something as simple as, I know that this is really important to you, but you should just know that Jason and I are not bringing our children up as Catholics, and so that means we're not going to have the same holidays that you all have, or we're not going to celebrate them the same way, and we're hoping to establish rituals that work for us, but that also work for you. If at all possible. And then when so you have this over and over again. But when they say, but you are having Christmas, right? Or you are coming to us on Christmas, or you are going to church on Christmas, you say, no, actually, I know that's important to you, but it's not important to us. And we have decided to do it such and such a way. And I know that's a problem for you, and I'm sorry, but that's not how we're doing it. So that you can get firmer and firmer and firmer, and you can do it respectfully. As long as you can say, I know that's a problem for you, I know it's hard for you, but that's not what we're doing. Most parents will feel heard and will be willing to meet you somewhere in the middle. Some parents know, and when your parents are really rigid, then you have to be firmer, and it doesn't always feel respectful because you're setting really firm limits with them that they're not accepting.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation, and Sarah and I have experienced that on both sides. As I mentioned, her being raised Catholic and me Jewish, and we've decided to kind of really do neither. So we've had those conversations with our parents, and
you get it from both sides.
Yeah, and so we're both getting it. And it is an important thing to be able to communicate about. And I love that it's a simple sentence, but saying like, I know it's important to you, but so you're acknowledging their feelings rather than being like, no, we're not doing that. And just turning it down. You're acknowledging it, but then standing firm. It's an important thing to be able to do. But from personal experience, it doesn't mean that they're going to be like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
Great to hear. But if you can at least start off in a way that's not antagonistic or that they're not like really putting up their defenses or really getting upset. But I would just say then you got to stick to your guns, because like we talked about earlier, it's the relationship takes priority, or as you become an adult, but it's funny, even you could be 40 years old, but your parents are still your parents, right? But yes. Still, you're your own person. And just, I'm sure as a parent we'll experience this as Stella grows up, but you gotta respect that they're their own person, and it might hurt, but really communicating in a way that acknowledges their feelings, I think, can help ease that pain a little bit, and not take it away, but definitely make it go more smoothly.
Yeah, there's another thing you can do, which doesn't always work. So there's two things. One is to remember that it's an evolving process, that how your parents feel will change, as will some of how you feel. As Stella gets older, some of the things that you think right now are going to shift, but so will all of your parents' positions will shift. And so it's really useful not to get into a total power struggle. I mean, you have to set limits, and that may turn into a power struggle, but if you can say something that acknowledges also that, we're not practicing the traditions of the religion that you are practicing, but you instilled all these values in me. And those values are there even if I'm not going to temple or going to church or not doing the things that you think of as part of that. That what you've done, you've planted a little seed that you're not rejecting them, and you're not rejecting the values they've taught you. So again, some parents can't handle that. They can't, if you're not doing the actual rituals, it's not okay with them. But a lot of parents eventually can come around to sort of feeling better about, okay, it's not like you're rejecting me, you're rejecting certain traditions, but you have taken in the values that I've tried to teach you.
Yeah, that's another great piece of advice, and it's pretty interesting to hear that statistic that 49% of married couples are in a interfaith relationship. So it is. It's
actually 49%. It's 49% unmarried couples.
Unmarried.
It's small. Yeah, smaller. 39% of married couples.
Still a big number. Yeah. Yeah, and are there any other things when it comes to particularly, I guess, interfaith relationships, whether they be married or dating, around the holidays or just in the relationship in general that can present problems?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that can present problems. The thing that is really important is to remember always that you got together with this person, at least in part because of the differences between you. And so those differences, in belief system, in traditions, in how you think about the world in some ways, I think it's always really, really useful to think about that there's something about those differences that appealed to you. And to try to, we're all really good at finding the things that we don't agree with and the things that we don't like and the things that bother us. But to try to find the things that brought you together. So I'm also from an a long-term interfaith marriage. And I'm Jewish and my husband's Christian. And he always said that everything about Judaism fit with his value system. That's not always true, but that's what he said. But there were some things that he believed in that I really couldn't understand. So what I would work on was trying to figure out how they colored his values, and how those things made him the person that I did love and I did care about. And that was really useful to think about what it was that he was bringing to the table that probably had to do with his religious beliefs that I didn't have in the exact same way, or that I would like to incorporate into my life. I will also tell you that after being together for a long time, we have found that our belief systems are practically merged. So what we believe, both in terms of religion and in terms of our whole value systems, have become very, very similar. So that's another part of the evolution, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've said it on the podcast a few times before, but it'd be quite boring if you dated someone that you agreed with everything, had the same likes and interests. It'd be like being with yourself. And it's like, that's
exactly
why we are attracted a lot of times to the people we're with, is because they are different. Despite what we might want that. Why can't you just agree with me? Or why don't you want to do this? It's like, well, they're a different person, and that's what makes it interesting. Otherwise,
exactly,
you're with yourself, and that's no fun. And it is also interesting how you said your beliefs have merged. I don't have a large sample size, but I've heard that before, and I know just from Sarah and I's, and not even around religion necessarily. I mean, certainly a little bit, but just a lot of other things. We had base values, I think is important. We talk about having those, but even just a lot of other things, I've noticed that we've merged over the years and becoming more and more similar in those. Do you find that that's a common thing with long-term relationships?
Yeah, and I actually want to change the word, because I think merge is isn't quite correct because you still are different. You're still two different people.
Right.
And in fact, that's one of the problems that people who have been together for a long time have in reverse is they expect each other to be so similar that they forget that they're two different people. But I think that it's that your values become more coalesced, maybe. Your ideas, your experiences, you share so much that a lot of the old differences sort of get ironed out. But it is totally not that you don't. I mean, I know I said it, so I'm take full responsibility for the word. But I don't think it's that you merge as much as you become really. When your relationship is working, over time you become more integrated as a partnership.
Yeah, that's well put. And it's, I don't want to harp on this too much. We're going to go forward to the lasting love round, but it almost seems like it's the effect of like walk a mile in someone else's shoes and that you're going to be able to relate more to them. Well, live with someone for 20 years and you're going to hopefully have more empathy, and you guys are experiencing a lot of the same things, obviously. So your life is being shaped by the same environment, the same experiences, that it makes sense that those things coalesce, as you said, and something that is great in relationships and just, I think, better for the world as a whole, that if we can approach all of our relationships with our neighbors and people that we don't know with more of that open mind of trying to maybe not directly experiencing what that other person is, but understanding, your relationship will be better, personally and with those, around you.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
Excellent, Diane. Well, this all been great information here. Lots of good stuff for the holidays coming up. Hopefully it'll help our listeners have those difficult conversations with each other, but certainly with the parents. I know that can be tough. We both know from personal experience. So thank you for that. And now we got to move forward to the lasting love round.
But first, let's take a break and talk about one of today's sponsors, Talkspace.
Talkspace is an online therapy company that will allow you to choose from thousands of certified and vetted therapists where you can communicate with them directly through your phone, through text, email, video chat, or voice. And it's super easy to do. And obviously you're listening to this podcast, so you want relationship advice, whether you're in a rut or you just want to take your relationship to the next level. Talking with a therapist is the best way to get there, besides listening to I Do podcasts.
So if you want to sign up today, head on over to Talkspace.com/I Do and get $30 off your first month. That's Talkspace.com/I Do and enter the promo code I Do.
Talkspace, therapy for how we live today.
If you're looking for a super fun and creative gift for a loved one this holiday season, you really need to check out Storyworth. Storyworth makes it easy and fun for your loved ones to share their stories with weekly emailed story prompts with questions that you would never think to ask. And at the end of the year, they'll get their stories bound in a beautiful hardcover book that will be a great tool to share with your family and get to know each other in a whole new way.
So we got Storyworth for my mom, and we already got this great story from her where I thought I knew the story, and apparently I didn't, because she went skiing with me when she was 7 months pregnant. So I'm about to pop and was skiing down a glacier in Germany with me. And I had the short end of the story, and now I got the full thing. And it's great because I can share it with my brother and sister. We're all scattered across the country, and this is really a thing we can share.
So if you have a family member who loves telling stories, Storyworth will be an awesome holiday gift. For $20 off, visit storyworth.com/I Do. That's storyworth.com/I Do. What is one tool or practice our listeners can use on a daily basis to help improve their relationship?
I would say find something positive to say about your partner every single day. We're all really good at pointing out what bothers us, and we're not so good at pointing out what we like or admire or appreciate about our significant other. Partly because we take these things for granted. But I don't care how long a couple has been together or how close they are. It's very important to share good thoughts about one another. Sharing those thoughts is a super way to keep a relationship healthy. But there are a couple of rules I just want to quickly say. One is it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It does need to be genuine, and it can't contain a barb. So like you can say, I love that shirt and tie or that dress on you. It brings out the color of your eyes, but you cannot add, but you would look so much better if you lost a few pounds. That ruins the thing. And the other thing is, I would say, although you don't have to say something different every day, what you do say should be specific. So you might start with something really general, like you're such a good, kind, caring, something like that person. But then give a really specific example, like this is something that my husband does, so I say it to him regularly. But I love how you always check the name tag of the clerk at the checkout counter, and then you use their name when you ask them how they're doing, because I know that makes them feel like a human being, which probably doesn't happen too often.
That's great advice. So like even something like an action that you saw your partner do, rather than complimenting what they're wearing or stuff like that. I love that.
Exactly.
Is there a book or resource you could recommend for listeners who want to improve their relationship?
Yes, and actually it's interesting because you said the name of it a little while ago, Chase. You were just talking about what we were talking about. But it's called Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. It's by Douglas Stone and Bruce Patton. It's a classic, and it is. I recommend it to the couples I work with all the time. It's really, really useful for finding ways to talk about all kinds of hard things. And I didn't remember anything specific from it just now, but I can guarantee you we'll have some useful suggestions for talking to your parents about the holidays also.
That's an excellent resource. Thank you. We'll have that on your show notes page on idopodcast.com. We've been married for 3 years now. Is there any advice you'd give newlyweds?
Yes. You also have a young child, so this is for newlyweds and new parents, which is, it's fairly, you hear it fairly often, but it's really important, which is to make sure that you find time to nurture your relationship with each other. A lot of times I see young couples who have the idea that, well, the wedding's over, so they should now be in a long-term relationship. And it doesn't work that way. It's relationships, I mean, we've been talking about this, but relationships evolve over time. And you have to keep working at it. And then when a child comes along and you're putting all your attention on the child, which, you're supposed to be doing, it's really important to remember that you also have to nurture your relationship. And if you can keep doing that, which includes both what I said before, which is to talk about positive feelings, but also to process the problems that come up, and to rekindle the romance, which you have to do over and over again because it gets lost in the everyday, mundane experiences of life. But if you can do that, if you can think that you're nurturing something that you're going to have, like, watering and feeding a plant, you'll have the makings for a long-term relationship.
What advice would you give our single listeners looking for a happy relationship?
So my recommendation for if you're single, is that you nurture the connections that you do have. Your family connections and also your friendships. That I have found over the years that getting into a frenzy over finding a life partner can backfire. It's more productive to pay attention to the people who are in your life, who care about you and who you care about. It doesn't mean you shouldn't date, but when you date, it's important to remember to try to get to know the person and not to ask yourself if this is the person you could see yourself married to, because that's something that takes time. That's something you don't find out right away. I think it's much more useful to ask yourself if you like being with this person right now, and if you want to learn more about them. And actually, I think it's helpful to think about a date as a potential friend. I know the issue of physical chemistry is important, but physical attraction doesn't actually say whether a person is going to be a good life partner. And although this surprises a lot of people when I say it, physical chemistry can actually take a little while to develop. And if you're in a relationship with somebody who is a good friend, you have a much better chance of having a good life partner. Although I'm not suggesting that one of your friends will suddenly turn into a romantic partner. That actually happens far less often in real life than it does in the movies. But in nurturing your friendships with your friendships with people of your same sex as well as opposite sex, and really getting to know the people that you care about and being with them, you're going to develop all of the skills and all of the emotional muscles that also make a long-term romantic partnership work.
Oh, that's great advice, Diane. And after 100+ shows, I don't think we've gotten that particular one for single listeners. And it makes a lot of sense to nurture those relationships you have. And I think even for people that are in a relationship, to not let your friendships and your family relationships slip too much. Another important thing to recognize. And you've given us and our listeners so much great advice. I know Sarah and I, coming from two different backgrounds, have used some of the stuff you mentioned, but we'll definitely be able to use a lot more of the communication styles this upcoming holiday season. So why don't we finish by having you tell our listeners where they can find you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, you can find me on my website, which is dianebarth.net, and on Psychology Today. On my blog is Off the Couch. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's excellent. All of those links will be on your show notes page on our website at idopodcast.com, and our listeners know to go there to check them out. And we appreciate it so much for coming on the show, and thank you again.
Thank you. I wish you all a happy holidays.
Thank you very much. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. As always, you can find the links from today's show on our website at idopodcast.com. And while you're on the website, we encourage that you check out some of the free resources that we've created for you guys. One of those is the 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. And we send you an email every day for 14 days with doable challenges to help strengthen and make your relationship even better. And we've also created cheat sheets and workbooks for your relationship, and you can find all of those on our website. And lastly, our Facebook group, which is the Love Tribe. We encourage all of you guys to join our group there as well. And if you ever have any topic suggestions or ideas for the podcast, please send them our way. You can email us at info@idopodcast.com, and we would love to hear from you guys. And we hope you enjoyed today's show.